So your industry is a pretty competitive industry. What's your advantage?
Yeah, I think getting back to what we were talking about earlier, most digital agencies that really thrive, they are drawn to what they perceive as the more sexy stuff, like online video, which we're now getting into a little bit, and but a lot of things that have a lot more flash appeal to them. And we have had at our roots, and we haven't ever denied the fact that we're really passionate about bringing innovation to the email marketing medium, which has been declared year after year for the past dozen years that email is dead. But the reality is that it's a great brand storytelling platform, and it helps to drive revenue at the same time. And it's a longer form medium than 280 characters in Twitter. So it has a different purpose. So that is where we differentiated early on. And then because we've been able to attract really kind of world-class brands that we're working with, and we've been able to attract some amazing talent, creative talent and strategic talent. And so now that we've expanded our capabilities into more motion graphics and mobile app and content for within mobile apps, that I think that talent is also differentiating us, on top of our business model being a very very clear on digital campaigns in that medium.
Mm-hmm. How do you actually go about attracting clients?
Our business, and typically we just to give, because you're an accounting firm with an accounting audience, we tend to have a minimum spend with a client has minimum spend of about $250,000 with us, but some of our clients are upwards of many millions with all the campaigns that we do with them and a lot of the work that we do. So it is a long sales cycle, and it is incredibly relationally driven. And so one of the things that we're trying to do, we do a lot in the community around, we really believe in generous hospitality. So we host a lot of events at our office. Again, having to change that mindset a little bit to more digital in this new world we're in. And we try to host conversations, whether it's around equity or their marketing conversations, or entrepreneurial conversations in Portland. And that tends to build relationships. I run a podcast called Cause and Effect, with an A, Effect. And the CEOs of often those consumer brands that I'm bringing those interviewees all together in different happy hours after, like a couple of times, 2-3 times a year. So really trying to build community with entrepreneurs from both the nonprofit and the for-profit space, and trying to create an example of hopefully doing good in the community helps to build relationships to land clients, that helps Thesis to be a platform for its employees to do more good in the community, and that sort of thing. So that's how we approach it, but a lot of agencies approach it really differently.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting, because I think participating in the community and building relationships, that is very similar to how accountants traditionally build their businesses as well. So, talking about community involvement, you mentioned that you had been involved with or founded Starbucks. And I've worked with a couple companies in the past that have participated in that organization.
Mm-hmm.
But now you're actually the president of the Entrepreneurs Organization, which is a different organization, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So EO, Entrepreneurs Organization, it's a global organization that has I think like 13,000 members. There's about 150 here in Portland. You have to have $1 million or more in revenue, and just kind of be I guess you don't have to be a purpose-driven entrepreneur, but there are a lot of purpose-driven entrepreneurs that are drawn to it. We meet monthly in small groups called forums of about 8 entrepreneurs, and there's a commitment. EO has a similar business model to Vistage and YPO and some of the other ones. It's basically like Starbucks, but with a whole lot more structure to it and a lot more accountability. And so that's why I was drawn into EO. And I think a lot of I was president a year ago, and we change every year to have a new president. I'm coming back onto the board right now. But I really give credit to EO for my own personal growth. It's not you don't talk just about business and growing your business the entire time. I mean, that's maybe half of it, but it's really looking at the holistic life of the entrepreneur and making sure that, what's going on with your kids and in your marriage, and, like key things outside the business that are going to impact the business if you're not in a good place. So it really, I've formed some really, you share really vulnerably in these small groups. And then there's also kind of chapter events that we have and retreats, things like that. So it's a powerful connecting place where entrepreneurs grow as people. And I really think that the limiting factor in a company's growth is the entrepreneur's mindset, basically.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, because I think participating in similar types of groups, wherever an entrepreneur happens to be, I think it's a great thing. Because the entrepreneur journey can be kind of lonely and isolating, and I think having that kind of network of colleagues to share ideas is a great idea. So just for our audience, if you haven't done this, you should probably, I would highly recommend that you get out there and find a group similar to what Ryan is talking about. And as Ryan mentioned, Entrepreneurs Organization is not just in Portland, so that might be a group that you could investigate. Yeah. So one of the things I often ask business operators is what their current challenges are. But I think probably we know that the most pressing challenge as of us recording this is the COVID-19 crisis. I guess maybe I shouldn't be so determinative about that. Maybe I'll open it up and ask you if that is true, if that is your most pressing crisis right now, and what you're doing to deal with it, and maybe your thoughts in general about how any business could be dealing with this.
Yeah, I think specifically it's the unknown. Now that we've been in this lead from home, work from home scenario for the past 4 weeks, and it's really, no one can predict, when the curve is going to be fully flattened and whether or not there's going to be a resurgence and when all these things are going to come into play. But for us, we are so reliant on our clients and their businesses being strong. We're in the fortunate position to have in Adobe, they're really growing right now, and all cloud-based creative software. With Nike, they've stayed really strong, and we're across all of our clients. We are in a really good area. Like the one bright spot is online sales that all brands and retailers can do. But really, with stores shut down all over the place, like on digital is where everyone is shifting, and we have been entrenched there for 17 and a half years, really helping to drive e-commerce for our clients. So we're currently hiring for 12 new positions, and I'm almost guilty saying that because I probably have 100 entrepreneur friends who've had to lay off staff, and probably a dozen of those had to lay off all of their employees who are in small business retail or restaurant business and things like that. And so I'm very sensitive to knowing that this is a very fortunate position to be in. Also, I know that there is likely going to be a delayed impact for us when these larger brands kind of assess all the information, have enough data to know what the new forecasting of demands are and things like that from their consumers. And so, yeah, it's just really hard to figure out the unknowns and how to staff for things when, because we have almost all of our staffing is full-time employees. We use very few contractors. So yeah, the unknown is really, really tricky. It makes you be laser focused on what's in front of you today and maybe a week out, but like where we typically do, 12 to 18 months planning, we can still shoot for our big, hairy, audacious goal of being recognized as one of the most innovative companies in the world by a Fast Company and things like that for 5 years out. But we know that the world has changed completely, and it's much more important that we stay super focused on taking care of our employees first. And the way to do that is anticipate client needs, lean in heavily, be nimble, like go the extra mile always. And so it's kind of getting back to those basics that are just really critical in this new COVID world.
I think you mentioned earlier that the company has about 134 employees.
Mm-hmm.
Is work at home a shift for you, or did you have a lot of people already kind of working remotely anyway?
It's definitely a shift for us. We are all about collaboration, and that includes the very old school whiteboard, marker, and all of that. It just helps the creative process to be around people, to read body language, to do all of that. So yeah, it's definitely a shift to collaborating through Zoom and through one-off calls and things like that. But we're adapting. We're adapting.
Yeah. So, we talk about these challenges and you've shared kind of some of the hurdles that you've overcome and the ups and downs that you've had in your journey. What would you say are the benefits from your standpoint? What are the benefits of operating your own business as opposed to just going and being an executive somewhere, working for somebody else?
Yeah, there's a ton of benefits. I mean, the last time I worked for someone else, it was, 80,000 person corporation at Intel. And I learned a lot of really good habits of, the management there was strong, and there's, quarterly objectives for your personal, path and all of these things. But the ability to, hey, I met someone who is really good at this one thing, and gosh, the client has been asking for this, and so we can expand our capabilities here. Like, let's do it. Like, the ability to just move on things quickly and to create. There's just something really beautiful about creating something from nothing, and then even like creating the new nonprofit called Emerging Leaders, like that. I was able to use the company to help create that platform, and so that is just really motivating and inspiring, and it's hard to go backwards. It would be really, really hard for me to work for someone else now that I have this freedom, creative freedom.
You were talking about the uncertainty with the current crisis, and I think that's definitely, I can echo that. That's true in my business, and so true in all my clients' businesses. And yeah, what you said sounds very familiar to me in the sense that that other folks that I've talked to happen to be in similar circumstances where currently cash flow is fine, but it's like, well, we don't know what's coming next. So I think this is a really speculative question about where you foresee the company 12 months from now, but I'm going to go ahead and throw it out at you anyway. But if things went ideally for you, where would the company be 12 months from now? Maybe we can caveat it that way.
Yeah, I think one thing the audience should know is when we rebranded last August, I kind of publicly announced and promoted a woman named Keely York, who's been with us for 8 years, to be our president and COO. And so we have this really good balance between Keely and myself of me being the probably annoying optimist, because I'm always very optimistic, and she is much more of a realist. And thank God, because she keeps us on track. So I think there's a really good balance in that, to be incredibly careful on our hiring, because that is our largest expense, is payroll and everything associated with folks. And at the same time, not being so conservative that we lose out on growing with our clients. So I'm going to optimistically say that we will, still be growing, maybe 10 to 20% by 12 months from now. And that is based on just the little information that we have now on the fact that we've landed a few new clients, and we've grown with our existing clients that I've talked about. But who knows that, if you ask Keely, she'd probably say we'll be lucky to hold to our current trajectory of like being flat. But I think she'd agree. I think we believe that we will grow cautiously, which is a change from last year. We grew revenue almost 75% year over year. So that was a massive growth year. And so we are very mindful and grateful that even a small amount of growth is what a lot of agencies are. Most of the agencies I've talked to have cut back 20 to 30% of their staff and things like that. So we're in a good spot.
So being who we are, I have to ask this question about accounting and your accounting process. And I want to ask you from the standpoint of, because you've had a nice kind of long journey from just pure startup to a company of pretty good size now. I imagine that your relationship as the CEO operator with the accounting and the finance work has changed over time in terms of how the company does it and in terms of your own relationship with how it's done. Can you speak to that a little bit? How that part of the entrepreneurial journey goes?
Yeah, I think when we were first starting out, we were very, we're still frugal, but our needs weren't as complex. And so we used an accountant that was a sole proprietor and just a one-man shop. And as we grew, it became apparent that we needed an accounting firm that could handle a lot of our business needs, and then as well as some of my personal needs, whether it's investing in a opportunity zone property last year, or things like that, that has a lot of complexity to deal with the tax credits and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So it's, again, similar to EO being the holistic person. I think an accounting firm, one of the things that an entrepreneur needs to evaluate is how can they look at your whole picture of your life, not just your company. So I think that's been really key. And then what I was talking about with Keely, she's now stepping into that financial realm more and more. We've hired a couple more. We used to have a finance department of one person, and then I was doing all the strategic finance because of my background. And I'm still doing a little bit of that, but we're now shifting systems from QuickBooks to a more enterprise level version that's integrated across our billing, like how we collect hours from employees and all kinds of things, integrated into all kinds of things. So there has been a shift, and it's kind of giving up control and giving up in some ways power. But I think the more there's this weird, unintuitive, I think, universal law that the more power you give away, the more it kind of comes back to you in a different form. So so I found that with leadership, and I think it's been true, and it's really helped us with like I said, the partnership that I have with Keely, and as well as some of these new leaders on the financial front that we're bringing into the fold.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, we're nearing the end of the show today, but I always like to ask, is there anything I should have asked or could have asked that I didn't?
No, I thought about that question. No, I mean, I'd turn it back on you. Like, what have you not told your audience that they'd want to know about you, Ty?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, I don't know. I try to be out there and be transparent about me as much as I can. I'm looking out the window right now at my garden, so the only thing I can think of is I'd rather be gardening than in the office working right now.
Yeah.
But I think my audience might guess that. They've seen me do some videos from the garden, so they might already know that.
That's cool. Yeah. No, I thank you so much for having me on the show, and looking forward to amplifying the message to my audience with this podcast.
Yeah, and your podcast again?
Cause and Effect.
Thank you. And we'll put a link to that down in the comment section, or the notes for the show if people want to go check that out. All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ryan. Thanks everybody. Ty. And we will see you guys in the next show or the next segment. Welcome back, everyone, to the None of Our Business YouTube show and podcast. We are here social distancing, quarantining ourselves, staying indoors, whatever you want to call it. We're in Oregon, and they didn't call it the same things that they call it in other states. We were trying to make it sound nicer, but we're doing the same thing other states are doing in terms of not going out when you don't need to, and working from home, especially those of us that are considered non-essential. So I'm here today with my non-essential buddies in the crew of the None of Our Businesses show. I've got non-essential AJ Wheeler and non-essential Charlie Zigman here with me. Hey, guys.
Hey, how's it going? Hey. The insult for accountants used to be we were period costs, but now we're also unessential workers. So, I mean, I'm just feeling doubly great about being an accountant this week.
It just keeps getting better.
Period cost and also unessential. So we're at home. Anyway, it gave me a good chance to read up for this week. And actually, I got an article from Mark Rosenberg, who's big in the CPA realm. So he ranks his survey of CPA firms as used to all kinds of things. And it's probably the most well-known survey that happens in the CPA, genre of businesses. And he actually wrote a really good feature of articles on how to develop your practice. And the last one is called How Not to Develop. So he kind of has a old school view, I guess, if you would call it. And he has basically the first 3 disciplines he lists that you should adhere to first, and really use this 4th one that he's talking about as a prop up for it is protect and grow existing clients, identify and nurture referral sources, and focus on prospective clients coming from those referral sources. And the 4th one that he's really talking about that he says not to put too much time into, if the first 3 aren't supported, is the putting on the seminars, speaking at conferences, writing articles, and many others, which I'm sure he's referring to kind of the new school kind of delivery of content, kind of like what TCA does, what we're doing with the podcast here. So I just thought, this is something we've talked about before, but I thought it was interesting. In his surveys, he talks about CPA firms usually spend 3% of their revenues on marketing. So for a $5 million firm, that's $150,000 a year. $10 million firm, that's $300,000. So on 30 million, it's 900, almost $1 million. And basically what he's saying is that those organic growth rates are about 4 to 5% in his surveys. And 50 to 80% of all organic revenue growth comes from referrals, that he's basically making the case that a lot of CPA firms are wasting the money that they spend, this 3% on marketing firms, because they get things like social media, website, blog, newsletters that are filled with uninteresting information that they don't see a return on their investment, and so they just kind of do away with that social media post. So I thought I'd like to get your guys' basically his message is they need to take a better look at the content that they're putting out, and that they should treat that as part of their everyday kind of using their internal information to put out that kind of content, as opposed to paying such a large firm to do so.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few things in there that I recognize that I don't have the answers to, but I certainly have opinions on, which has formed kind of the direction that I've gone with our team on TCA and how we approach things. But I mean, one of them, just in terms of the facts, I mean, historically, CPA firms don't have, I mean, the organic growth rate, like he was talking about, 4 to 5%. It's not impressive. I mean, it's very difficult for your traditional CPA firm to just like organically grow its way to being a larger firm. Most firms that actually grow substantially do so through acquisition. That's a well-known thing in the industry. Now, I think there's plenty of those kind of folks out there that hawk, they can help you grow your CPA firm, you know, amazing bounds, you know, and you see them on LinkedIn, where I spend a lot of time, in other places, and so they'll probably dispute what I'm saying here in terms of what's possible, and maybe that's right. Maybe some folks out there do have some secret formulas, but just in generalities, that's been the case, that most CPA firms, even if they do spend money on marketing, they don't really grow through their marketing. They go through those traditional referrals. So just the data point rings true to me in terms of what he's saying there. And then the other piece that is, when he talks about putting out uninteresting content, that kind of hits home, because I think sometimes I'm the purveyor of lots of uninteresting content in a lot of ways. But I think my take on it has been, which I think a lot of firms got duped into by kind of the general marketing idea of, oh, all you need to do is get attention. You don't actually have to create the content yourself. And my stand on this has always been that you really kind of need to own the content, and it should be stuff that you would be a thought leader in yourself. And so for us, for example, we don't generally post a lot of content that is created by other people. We don't go out and buy third-party content and then post that. We create our own content. So as uninteresting as it may be, I think, people who follow our content can rest assured that it actually is our content. We're not just like finding stuff and then throwing it up in our LinkedIn feeds and saying, hey, look at me because I happen to see this article, or that I happen to buy some content from other people. And I don't want to say that too negatively, because I know I have peers that do this, and I think they get some success off of it. I would just say that it's a belief. It's like, I don't have the science behind me. I just believe it. There's that Bill Maher does that skit or that sketch of I don't know if it's a fact that I've heard, and I think that's where I sit on this. I don't know if it's a fact that developing your own content is the best way to go. I've heard, but that's just a belief that I have, and that's my way of kind of tackling some of the interesting, uninteresting part, because I think if you have any chance at all of making kind of a dry tax law more interesting, or a dry accounting issue more interesting, it's being passionate about it like you actually know it, like you're in it, you thought about it, you came up with a thought on it, you wrote about it, you made a video about it, it's your content. I mean, if it's so boring that you can't even spend the time to write your own article about it yourself, you pull somebody else's article, why do you think anybody else will care? That's kind of my thought on it. But again, I say that cautiously. My friends out there that do that, don't get mad at me for saying that, but yes, that's what I believe.
Well, let me say that first of all, you're not alone in being a purveyor of uninteresting content, because I too have been guilty of that from time and again. But I think that, like, for me personally, I know that I actually do some of my own best personal learning when trying to make content, because it forces me to try to explain something that I feel I understand and that I maybe do to an extent, but until I try to put it to words, I don't know that I've always thought about it as deeply. And there was a saying that an accounting professor I used to have would always say, which is that you don't fully understand something until you can explain it to the man on the bus. And so it's like this idea that, like, until you can really say something simply enough that somebody who isn't interested in it could understand it, then that's your metric. And so I think that that's been true for me a lot, of just like, yeah, I put out videos that I don't know people, want to watch, but in doing it, it causes me to think about things that otherwise I just kind of breeze over. And so I think the article makes true points, and I believe that it is difficult to create sales from that type of content, but I think it has another value, and he maybe kind of just breezed over that, is how I felt.
100%. Yeah.
There was another part in the article that I thought was really interesting, where he did talk about the old school, the really old school way of thinking, where if you did a great job, people just roll in the front door because they'll tell their friends about it, And I think that maybe that mentality sometimes sits, especially maybe in some of those smaller firms, where they feel they don't have the time to put into making content or making a dent in what they feel like are useful social interactions. And so they do just kind of throw their hands up and throw a little bit of money at going to sponsor things or to do something in the community, when I think, they could make a much larger reach and use the content that you're putting out there to support what you're already doing, and at least provide examples that you know what you're talking about and that you have the expertise to serve the client base. If they were to, I mean, it's no secret now, if somebody's going to hire somebody, they do a quick Google search. What is this guy all about? What does this person do? What does this gal do? How much do they know my industry? Do they fit with what I'm trying to do? I think more people are doing more due diligence, and if you have content that's created by yourself that addresses the issues that they're looking to solve, I think you do a better job of getting that prospective client, and the content propping up the other things that you do. Because if you have great content and you drive somebody to a service and you've represented it incorrectly, or you made a value proposition that you can't fulfill, all the great marketing in the world isn't going to fix that. I don't think.
Yeah, I think I've got two different thoughts on what you just said there. One of them is that, in my experience, after you've been working in a community and within a business network for a while, there is some truth for accountants that if you've done a good job, that the work will just come to you. And to some extent, I would say that if you're good at what you do, and particularly if you're somewhat niched, you've got somewhat of an avenue, and you're connected to some kind of community, then I think you can often fill your own plate with work from that perspective without doing a lot of marketing. And particularly if you're willing to trade off price, because if you're connected to that network and you're known to do a good job, and you're also known to be very cost effective, then you win all day long. And so I think if you're kind of just doing it on your own, then I think there is a lot of truth to that point. And so on that front, I've always said to my peers or other people, in terms of deciding where you want to spend your time, this goes back to something what Charlie was saying about how creating content and some of the marketing activity can actually be, if you do it right and you kind of are creating your own content in line with where you want your particular career to go, where you want your expertise to go, what you want to be a thought leader of, then I think that you have an opportunity to say, okay, I can fill my plate in terms of total hours. I can do no marketing at all, and I can fill my plate and just have a bunch of chargeable hours at one rate. Or I can become a thought leader, put a lot of time into content that I don't really get paid directly for, which in theory should increase my rate, which means I'm doing less billable hours. And I would say there's not a right answer to those alternatives, right? Because if you don't like making content and doing the marketing, then why not? Why not just find the equilibrium rate where your reputation will carry you through and just fill your plate and be done with it? And I don't see anything wrong with that if that's the career you want. if you kind of enjoy the creative aspect of creating content and the marketing and becoming a thought leader, then do it with the intent that you're building a level of expertise and a reputation that will increase your rate per hour to make up for the fact that you're not billing as many hours as the other person, right? And so I think if you're kind of doing this on your own, you have those broad alternatives. That's the way I've always seen it. And I've obviously, people watch me on LinkedIn, they know which way I've gone with this, that I've decided to invest a lot of time in content, to do less chargeable hours, to do more content, to get a higher rate per hour, because I enjoy the content. I enjoy the show, so to speak, of doing that. And I enjoy the research and the learning that goes behind it as well. And so to make that pay off, I've also got to get a higher rate for my billable hours. So it works out that way. So that's one thought, but I would give a totally different thought on this. When I say that if you're on your own and you're an experienced accountant, you can kind of fill your plate with just a good reputation and finding your equilibrium price. I think that's true when you're mostly on your own. I think it's really hard to scale a firm where you're actually selling other team members in your firm and you're trying to build a portfolio for other people on your team. I think at that point, it's hard to scale that. So I think that if it's just all about you, that works. But if it's really that you're trying to build a bigger firm with more team members and you've got to build a bigger client base than just you alone can handle, then just relying purely on just your personal reputation is a hard way to go.
Totally. And then the other thought process here, the other like kind of interesting factor is, now we're all at home more. And so I think that I think before it was like, yeah, get out there, get clients, don't spend your time making content, but it's like everyone's at home now. So I think that that's a factor too, that makes it, more, makes more sense to spend the time doing that when traditional marketing isn't going to work the same way.
But yeah, I think that this has nothing to do with the exact statement that you're talking about, but the notion that, you're at home more, so now you've got more free time. Really? Do you have more free time, Charlie? Tell me about this. Where does this come from? Is it because you're not driving? Is it the time that you would have driven to work? When people keep saying that to me, I'm like, where's all this free time that I have just because I'm working from home?
I guess, for example, like we would used to be a normal thing for us to kind of go to events. They might have things around town, kind of business seminars and that kind of a thing that you might otherwise go and be in person and spend your time doing that. And that might be your approach to marketing at those times, right? That's how you get out there and meet new people. But now that's just not a factor anymore. And so I think this is just kind of a relative, there's another factor that the article doesn't really describe, Good
point. Yeah, we're not, like as a team, we're not doing the things that you would do in person, the networking events, the lunches, the coffees in person, stuff like that. So what are we replacing that time with? Good point. Yeah.
But I will say I do agree with your sentiment there, which is that I don't feel that there is any free time and that I don't feel it's any easier than it was, at least not for me personally right now. So yeah, kind of going into a little bit of a different article here. I've got an article from Forbes that's talking about, the article is called "Micromanagement Doesn't Work in the Office, so Why Inflict It on People Working from Home?" And so it's just taking a look at how a lot of companies are dealing with the fact that everyone is working from home, whether they like that fact or not. And so one approach that a lot of companies have taken is that they've gone ahead and bought software that enables them to monitor their employees really closely. It does things like count how many emails they send, maybe how many lines of codes they type, and some of the more intrusive ones even take screenshots of your screen every 5 minutes and make it into this like time collage to where a manager can sit and just surveil his entire team in the ultimate micromanagement, just sort of fiesta. And so I wanted to kind of talk to you guys a little bit about, what are some ways that businesses can deal with these changing times and maybe still get productivity out of their people without micromanaging them to the point of complete like draconian, control.
First, I just want to say micromanagement fiesta. That one's going on Instagram. Ethan, you hear it? Micromanagement fiesta. Our producer Ethan, he's gonna grab that one. That's like we had a great one that hit LinkedIn just recently. The Star Trek accountant from Asia. So so now we've got the micromanagement fiesta from Charlie. That's awesome. Yeah, I think it's just crazy to me that somebody would even like want to do that. I mean, if I had to do that with my team and felt, or if I felt the need that I had to like have this software that was taking screenshots and managing, monitoring what they were doing on their computers at home throughout the day, I would poke my eyes out. I would, I mean, I'm already lost. I'm already doing something way wrong if I feel like I need that. So that's just a crazy notion to me. And I think it's interesting when we talk about micromanagement in the digital age. There's a lot of digital tools that can let you be crazy, I guess, if you want to. But at some point, seems like this should be the opportunity for people to learn how to lead better, and lead toward ultimate outcomes and value-driven outcomes rather than micromanaging individual tasks.
I think it really depends on first of all, who you're managing, and I think maybe their expertise level. I can give an example, like in the construction trade, for instance, a lot of people are paid on like piecework. So if you're like a finish carpenter or something like that, you get paid for how many linear feet of crown molding you did, or a bricklayer, how many bricks you actually laid. You get paid piecework for that because they have like a standardized amount for bricklayers or for finish carpenters. What you don't have piecework for is like the lonely construction helper or the guy that does cleanup or something like that, a very manual job that doesn't require much skill, and that's usually a lower paying job. Now that person does need to be accounted for during the day. Not that you need to, there's styles to how micromanagement you can be, but his whereabouts and activities need to be known about, because normally he's doing very different things and needs to be accountable for those hours during the day that you're paying for him. Whereas the guy that has more experience, a journeyman, finished carpenter, takes a lot of skill. That person knows what they're doing, and they're paid on piecework anyway, so you don't care if it takes them 2 weeks to put you might care, but you don't care if it takes them 3 days to put what should have took somebody else 1 day, because you're paying for a piece of work that's completed. And I think the same thing holds true with like a professional work. If you're dealing with call center employees or work from home automation, answering phone calls, or fast food workers or something like that, it's much different to be able to account for their whereabouts or what they're doing on a given hour, as opposed to like a seasoned accountant or a lawyer or something that is getting a case briefing ready or a closing of the books ready or something like that. Those are two, I think, very separate things. And I think really the management style not only depends on the person, but I guess the level of the worker and the level of work being performed.
Yeah, I think that's the leveling of the workers is a very interesting point, and it leads towards this whole discussion of automation and things, right? In terms of how many jobs and for how long out there will there be those jobs that are essentially where we're using human beings as just components or cogs within a process that otherwise is the process is the competitive advantage, right? Like for sure, and fortunately or unfortunately, in the sense that it means that I lack some perspective, I've never worked in or dealt in businesses where the process itself was the competitive advantage rather than the people. And so but I know they exist. I mean, I can see it intellectually speaking that you have those jobs. Like I think about, you mentioned call centers. I think what came to my mind is how many call centers is it the case where the actual call center work could be done by automated or robotic voice, but it hasn't been because we wanted the human touch. It wasn't that we actually wanted human judgment in how to answer that call. We just wanted to fool the other person on the other side of the end to feel like they were connecting with a real human being. And so that's why we had a human being doing that job. And I think that there's a lot of kind of jobs that are kind of like that, where essentially the process is dialed in, and the only reason we have a human being is we haven't doing something is we haven't fully mastered the technology to not have a human being doing it. And so yeah, I think that those kind of roles obviously would have a different issue when it comes to this question of at what level do you manage somebody.
Well, I mean, it's a well-known fact that it's not as satisfying to sort of yell at an automated system when you're on the phone. You want to, when you call in and you're angry and you want to get somebody on the line, you need another person there to really take out your frustrations on. That's just accepted and known at this point.
Well, that's a great way to end this topic and move on to the next article.
All right, on that note, thanks for dropping by and listening to the podcast this week. If you'd be so nice, hit that subscribe button, the bell down below to subscribe, tell your friends about it. Do your internet karma some good and hit the like button. We'll see you guys next week. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everyone.